I had been writing some short stories. I generally like novels better because I generally read novels more. I like long stuff that I can get into, but every once in a while I'll have an idea that really fits the short story format better. And I had been actually trying to publish short stories for a while. No success. I mean, I'm talking about years and years and years of trying to get published in all sorts of different scales and venues and different genres as well. And then I finally was able to get Tear Tracks published with a tour. And when I went back to them to say, do you want any other short stories? They said, oh, we're booked for the year, but do you have any novellas? And that's how we got the Sentinel cycle, actually. And I was like, I don't know, maybe a little less than halfway, maybe like a third of the way into Infomocracy. And I was like, yes, this is a standalone excerpt. And they were like, it's not, but we'd be interested in novels too. And I finished it as fast as I absolutely could. And that's what happened. So I actually started writing it around the same time that I started my PhD, maybe even a few months before. I think the PhD influenced it as it grew, but the idea actually came from before that. And it came really from the work I was doing in the different places that I was living. And also, so there's sort of two parts of it, right? There's one part which is about the new geopolitical situation, which is like no countries, and people decide which government they want to belong to from these fairly small groups. And that came from really, working and living and traveling to so many different countries that had secessionist movements and that were just having a horrible time with it. And even countries that had, peaceful, democratically run secessionist movements. So I'm thinking about like Scotland, which is in the news again now, or, Spain has sort of a gamut of peaceful to less peaceful. And the US has secessionist movements periodically. And basically every country in the world has people who want to be in a different country. But I was also, I'd worked for some years in Sri Lanka, which has had a very violent one that had actually separated territory, not by law, but in fact, when we went through their territory, it was like being in a different country. The buses were run by the rebels. The radio station was run by the rebels. They had a different time zone. This is a very small island, but they managed it. And so, and then that has since been pretty ruthlessly changed. So that enclave no longer exists. Those enclaves no longer exist. Also, Indonesia, where I worked for many years, there were numerous secessionist movements that had different degrees of success. So it's just really getting very interested in these ideas of a country and why it was so important for even peaceful countries to be like, no, we're not going to split up. And thinking about for democratic countries, what does that mean? That, people can choose the government they want, but only out of these two, and you can't actually choose what country you live in or where the borders are. And so, that was one part of it. And then the other side, which is information, and this just massive global information management bureaucracy and running elections and this sort of thing, had to do with looking at elections in the United States and other places I lived, but especially in the United States, where I was fairly invested, and looking at the kind of data that we had on election results, just getting more and more granular, and thinking about what that meant and how that would kind of work in tandem with this idea of being able to split your country and align non-geographically. So it was really like all this, just this living experience and frustration. A lot of it, I think, came from my master's, actually, where we studied a lot of the background, because it's an international relations and economics master's. So we studied a lot of the background of, the nation state system and where that comes from and how it works poorly. And so, there was all these ideas, and then, I have all this stuff, which is kind of grim and upsetting, but at the same time, I really like stories that are fun and have a lot of action and adventure. And so I just started writing something like that. I kind of really set it up with like, okay, this is this totally different idea of how the world could work. And I'm going to pick 3 people who are three, there's some others, but there are three main people, and they're going to be in different sort of positions, not just in what their beliefs are, but also in where they are positioned in this system. So, you know, we have Ken, he works for a specific government, which is basically the equivalent of a political party. And he's, you know, he's on their side, and he believes that it's not only a good government, but also kind of his route to being, you know, not necessarily like super rich and powerful, but in a better position in his life. And then we have Mishima, who's an agent for this organization that's really overseeing everything and trying to keep things running smoothly, and trying to make sure that information is available for people to base their votes on. And then Domain, who's just like, no, none of this, we're going to burn it all down. He's just anarchist. He doesn't think it's good enough, even if it's, you know, in some ways better than where we are today. He's like, no, there's still, you know, democracy is still being used as a mask for terrible things happening, and we need to totally do something different. And, you know, having these three characters that I could kind of, yeah, let play basically, and they have pretty clear interests, each of them, and pushing them through this election cycle, which is just a time with built-in drama, that you know, you've got competition, you've got high stakes, you've definitely got campaign spies and people trying to throw a wrench in the whole thing and sabotage it. And, you know, letting the characters kind of go through that and grow and change. And that was, yeah, that made it pretty easy to write through the book.